take a look at h. In h, we have a 48y squared z cubed minus 2y cubed z to the fourth. Right off the bat, I already see a lot of different numbers and letters and everything, so let's see if there's anything we can pull out that's in common between the two terms first. So let's start out with the numbers, the 48 and the 2. Well, 48 and 2 are both divisible by 2, so at the very least I can factor out a 2. Now let's look at our y's. So I've got a y squared and a y cubed. At the very least, they both have at least 2 y's, so I can pull out a y squared. Now let's look at the z's. So I have a z cubed and a z to the fourth. So they both have at least 3 z's, so I can pull out a z cubed from both pieces. And then my leftovers are going to go inside of my parentheses after I'm done. So 2 is going to go into 48 as 24. Pulling out 2 y's means they'll be gone, and pulling out 3 z's means those will be gone, so I'll just have the 24. Minus, dividing out the 2 means the 2 will be gone. Dividing out or pulling out 2 of the y's from the last piece means I still have a y. Pulling out 3 z's means out of the 4 I'll still have a z left. But that's it. I'll have the 24 from the first piece and the y and 1 z left on the second piece, and that is my final answer. I was able to factor out a 2, 2 y's, and 3 z's. That's my final answer. Let's take a look at I. In I, we've got x squared minus xy minus 20y squared. And I have 3 terms. I don't see anything in common between all 3 terms, so I am looking at size, which tells me to look at AC method. I need an A, a B, and a C. The A is hidden, it's a 1. The B is also hidden, it's a -1, and the C is a -20. So when I'm starting to do my A times C for my AC method, I'm doing 1 times -20, which is a -20. And I'm going to need 2 factors of -20 that add up to the middle number, which is a -1. Well, what 2 factors of -20, remember that means I'm going to need 1 negative and 1 positive, add up to a -1, meaning they have to be side by side. Well, that would be a -5 and a +4. So let's see how breaking this up into a -5 and a +4 is going to help us. That'll help us break down the middle term, the -1xy, into 2 pieces, a -5 and a +4. Well, they had an xy when they were together, so when they split them up, we're going to also have an xy. The only thing that won't be changing is our first piece, which was an x squared, and our last piece, which was a -20y squared. But remember that the goal of this was, once I've got 4 terms, now I can do grouping. So what do the first 2 have in common? Well, they both have an x, so let's factor out the x from both pieces. That will leave you with an x still left over on the first piece, and a 5 and a y on the second piece. Then looking at the last 2 pieces, I can carry down my plus. And let's see, what do they have in common? Well, notice that they have a 4 and a 20, which means that they're both divisible by 4. And notice they both have at least a y there, so I can factor out a y. So I'm pulling out a 4 and a y. Well, pulling out a 4 and a y will just leave me with an x on the first piece. Dividing the 4 into 20 will leave me with a 5, and I'll still have one of the 2 y's left over, which is perfect because now I have my matching x minus 5y, parentheses and all, that I can now pull out. So I'm going to pull out my matching x minus 5y, which will leave me with my leftovers inside of their own set of parentheses, and x plus 4y. And that's my final answer, is an x minus 5y and an x plus 4y. And just as a quick reminder, remember it doesn't matter which order they're in. One last one here for this page is J. We've got 64x squared minus 25y squared. Again, there's no common factor between the two, but we do have two terms, so it's either going to be squares or cubes. Now, because both the exponents are divisible by 2, we are definitely looking at squares. So the question is, what is squared in each piece? Well, if you look at the first piece, what has been squared to get the 64 is an 8, and what's been squared to get the x squared is an x. And in the second piece, what's been squared is to get the 25 is a 5, and to get the y squared is a y. Well, how do we factor squares is as two pieces. And it means they'll both start out with an 8x. And it means that they'll also both end with a 5y. Remember, with squares, we can only split them up if they have a minus sign in the middle. We can only factor if there's a minus sign. There is, so we are good. And that means that one will have a plus and one will have a minus. And that is our final answer, an 8x plus 5y and an 8x minus 5y. Let's take a look at K. In K, we have 27.